Well, Casey, there's another big story involving the law and AI this week that we wanted to chat about. And it involves this behind-the-scenes beef that has been going on between OpenAI and some of its biggest critics.
Yeah, so there are really two big legal battles that this story is at the intersection of. One is the battle over OpenAI trying to convert itself into a for-profit enterprise. Right now, OpenAI is famously a nonprofit. This has created many issues for the company over the past several years. They want to be sort of a more normal money-making enterprise, and this is opposed by lots of people. Some of the people that oppose it are OpenAI's direct competitors, including Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. And OpenAI has been pretty aggressive in going after groups that they believe might be connected to those two. The second battle is about SB 53, the bill that we just talked about. It was just signed into law by California Governor Gavin Newsom, and it establishes some basic transparency requirements and whistleblower protections for people who work at AI labs. There were a lot of groups that lobbied both for and against this one. Encode was one of the groups that lobbied for it. And so those are the kind of two big legal battles that were happening next to each other. But today's story, Kevin, takes place right in between both of them.
Yes. So our guest today, Nathan Calvin, is the Vice President of State Affairs and General Counsel at Encode. They are a small AI policy nonprofit. They were started several years ago by a high school student. Fun fact. What were you doing in high school? I wasn't starting AI safety nonprofits.
Debate team, crushing it. Anyway.
Anyway, they have become one of these groups that is submitting briefs and lobbying lawmakers on a lot of these AI-related bills and efforts. They have also been very vocally opposed to the restructuring of OpenAI as a for-profit. And what seemed to happen here in Nathan's telling was that one night as this legislative process was ongoing, a sheriff's deputy showed up at his house and delivered a subpoena from OpenAI demanding that he produce all kinds of personal communications, included anything related to not just the restructuring, but SB 53, this bill that they had been advocating on behalf of.
Yeah, so this surprised folks because they do still identify as this kind of mission-driven company that's trying to create AI to benefit all of humanity. I think it's generally understood that during these legal battles, there are going to be people who lobby for and against, and that's just part of the process. But now one of those people who was doing the lobbying on behalf of his nonprofit finds himself with a legal battle of his own. And that got a lot of folks talking, including some people who worked at OpenAI, criticized their own employer for its behavior. So that seemed like something that it'd be worth understanding more about, Kevin.
Yes, this has been a subject of hot debate and conversation within OpenAI, as well as around the broader AI industry. And we wanted to talk to Nathan about his experience. But before we do that, since this is, after all, a story involving AI and legal battles, I should note that my employer, the New York Times, is engaged in its own legal battle. They are suing OpenAI and Microsoft over alleged copyright violations.
And my boyfriend works at Anthropic, but so far we've managed to avoid any legal battles. So counting our blessings on that one.
Well, check the mail when you get home.
Oh,
no! All right, let's bring in Nathan Calvin. Nathan Calvin, welcome to Hard Fork.
Pleasure to be here. Many-time listener, first-time caller. I think I said that wrong. But anyway, very glad to be here.
So just to set the scene for our listeners, you're in Washington, D.C. It's a Tuesday night. I'm assuming it was, a normal weekday. You and your wife were sitting down to dinner. And then you got a knock on your door. Tell the story from there.
When I opened the door, there was a sheriff's deputy who was there to serve me a subpoena from OpenAI asking for different communications and documents related to a piece of AI safety legislation I was working on, as well as about our criticism of OpenAI's restructuring to a for-profit. One thing I will say, just in terms of the timeline, because it's come up in some of the back and forth, is that actually on Saturday previously, I had gotten a call while I was visiting my mom and nephew saying that someone was trying to get into my apartment to serve me papers. And I said, I'm not there right now. Anyway, they finally did come on Tuesday. And so when Jason Kwan, the chief strategy officer at OpenAI, I think in his comment said something about, I should have known this was coming. I did know they were trying to serve me, but I didn't know about any of the details, and I didn't know they would be coming that exact night.
Now, I want to get to all of that, but first, I have not been served with a subpoena. Casey's been arrested many times, so he's familiar with how these...
But never convicted.
Yeah. He's familiar
Very
with how
nice.
these things go down, but like, are they literally handing you a packet of paper like in the movies, or what does it look like to be served with a subpoena from OpenAI?
Yeah. It is just a stack of papers. I did not know, again, I am a lawyer, but I didn't know that sheriff's deputies are the ones who at least some of the time serve subpoenas in DC. I later learned that that's not incredibly unusual, but it certainly was, surprising from my perspective. I don't know. To be clear, the guy was perfectly nice. I don't know, just to some degree, like after I had heard on Saturday that someone was trying to serve me papers, by the time it kind of actually happened and they were at my door, there was a little bit of like, okay, now I can figure out what is actually happening. And kind of, it was honestly the days preceding hearing that it was coming and it actually happening were honestly some of the most stressful. And it's like, okay, now I can figure out at least what we're dealing with and how to respond.
When you got into AI advocacy, I mean, was this on your radar as something that would likely to be happen, that people would be saying like, okay, like you got to like show us all the emails you've been sending about this?
No, I mean, I don't know. My mom worked in for the American Academy of Pediatrics for 25 years and was involved in litigation against tobacco companies. And they came and, took all of her papers out of her office at some point and, had told me, never write any emails you're not, comfortable with having read back to you later or something. And so,
oh, wow. So
like,
you were actually like way better prepared for this than the average person.
Yes, it runs in the family.
I think that's fair. Yes, indeed.
Did you understand immediately like why OpenAI was subpoenaing you? What was your sort of initial response when you actually started reading these papers and understanding what they were after?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways there had been a little bit of a preceding escalation before I received the subpoena, where there was. I had some sense that, we were doing, lots of advocacy and public communications and writing things to the attorneys general about this issue. And I, was getting some sense that this was getting on their nerves. I will say that like when they asked, there's part of me that's still thinking like, okay, maybe this is just a good faith question. And they're trying to figure out like, maybe, we are secretly funded and controlled by Musk or Meta or something. When I was reading through the subpoena, though, and I got to the part where it said all of your communications about SB 53, a bill we were working on, then I started to think this doesn't really feel like they are just asking good faith questions. There's again, and I don't know for a fact what's in their head, and I can't say it, but my impression of it was not that.
What you're saying is it would sort of make sense to me if for whatever reason they were serving me a subpoena and saying, hey, are you funded by Elon Musk? Is that why you're trying to block our for-profit conversion? But when they came to you and said, give us all the emails you've been sending about this bill that you're working on, that just kind of felt sort of out of scope.
Yes, it did. And one other thing I will add as well is, again, I was expecting maybe that a subpoena would come, but like when I had talked to a previous organization, like, the other orgs I was aware of that had been subpoenaed, it had been to their organization and just like their Delaware registered agent. And you just like get an email that, your Delaware registered agent got a subpoena. Like it wasn't people coming to their, fifth story apartment building at 7 p.m. or whatever. And so that was another aspect that did just feel kind of eyebrow raising. It just really does leave a bad taste in my mouth.
Right. I mean, there's one explanation that is like the sort of uncharitable explanation, which is that OpenAI is trying to sort of bully and intimidate any sort of nonprofits that are critical of its restructuring plan. There's another explanation, which I want to get your take on, which is that these are fair questions to ask. We don't have a lot of transparency. We have a lot of dark money sort of flooding into fights about tech regulation these days, and it's worth asking questions about who is behind those efforts. And I guess we should just sort of dispense with the central claim here. Nathan, let me just ask you straight up, are you or Encode working with or being funded by either Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg themselves, or people or entities associated with them or their companies?
So we are not funded by Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. If you go on our website, it says that we have received funding from the Future of Life Institute, which was one that was mentioned in their subpoena. Future of Life Institute several years ago got a donation from Musk, but they are not Musk. And we said this in our communications back with them. Like, I have never talked to Musk. Like, Musk is not directing our activities. It's false. I don't know. We submitted a asking the FTC to open an investigation into XAI and Spicy Grok and their things. And I will happily say on air that I think that like XAI's safety practices, I think are in many cases far, far worse than OpenAI's. Like again, so just like that central claim is false.
What about Mark
again,
Zuckerberg?
There's also
any relationship with him or Meta?
None. Zero. And again, like I think our partners who work on the issue, like, I don't know, we are an organization that focuses on AI safety and kid safety issues. Like, we are just constantly at war with Meta. The idea that Meta is backing us is just, right. It feels, again, I realize not everyone has the context and knows who we are, but it's just like completely laughable.
You do have a list of donors or funders on Encode's website. You say this is, we're generously supported by, and then you list a bunch of organizations, including the Omidyar Network, the Archwell Foundation, which is Harry and Meghan's foundation, the Survival and Flourishing Fund, which is a kind of effective altruism-linked philanthropy funded primarily by Jan Tallinn. So you do provide some transparency about who your funders are. Why do you think that wasn't enough for OpenAI? Why do you think they still had questions about Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah, I think to some degree you'll have to ask them. I'm not sure. I mean, again, there's also one thing to say here. Like, there is no general right for them to know about all of our. And again, like, the subpoena did not ask about the Omidyar Foundation because the Omidyar Foundation is not relevant to their litigation in any way. Like, the role of a subpoena is to get relevant information for the litigation you're engaged in, not to just like ask whatever questions you would like the answers to from other private organizations. Like, you know, we would love to send a subpoena to OpenAI and be like, tell us all the details of what you're planning to do in the restructuring. And like, are you going to disempower the nonprofit in the ways it perceives or whatever? But like, we don't have a right to do that. Like, that's not a question we can just ask them. Even though we might like to. And so what we did is, you know, we put out like a public letter asking them a bunch of questions. Like, OpenAI can go to the press and say, you know, we want transparency about these things. Again, they do have the right to ask us about Elon because they are in litigation about this. And again, I think if they had just reached out to us at our corporate address and said, are you funded or directed by Elon? And, you know, we explained no and proved to them no, and then they moved on. Like, I would understand that, and I think that that is a fair thing, and that Elon is attacking them and trying to destroy them, and they want to make sure that there are efforts that are not, you know, covertly being supported and directed by him. But I just like can't emphasize how far away what actually happened was from like that narrow question that they were entitled to ask.
So, I mean, as you reflect on this experience, do you feel like this was intimidation? Do you think that OpenAI is trying to penalize organizations for speaking up either against the for-profit conversion or for AI regulation?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's a question of intent, and I don't know what's inside their heads. And so I want to be careful about that, but I believe that is what they were doing. That is my best guess. And that was how I received it. I would like to be there to be another explanation for this. And if it really, you know, I thought it was possible when I put this out that maybe they would say, you know, hey, this was a misstep. Our lawyers went a bit far. We didn't really actually mean to add the thing about 53. Like, that's not what they said. They like doubled down and said that, you know, we think we are entitled to this. So I think that just is very important to note. And I will just say another thing that I don't think we've mentioned is that, you know, even for some folks within OpenAI, for instance, Joshua Akiem, who was speaking in his personal capacity, but put out a fairly long thread talking about the fact that what I was describing in my thread is you know, doesn't look great.
Yeah, but that was the unofficial response from someone at the company who was sort of breaking from the company itself.
Yes.
We've also seen Jason Kwan, as you mentioned, the chief strategy officer at OpenAI. He wrote a lengthy thread arguing that you and Encode were sort of only giving part of the picture, that Encode doesn't disclose their funding, and that this is not about SB 53. Jason said, quote, We did not oppose SB 53, and they said that basically this was sort of a tempest in a teapot. There was also a quote that a lawyer for OpenAI, Ann O'Leary, gave to the SF Standard, saying, we welcome legitimate debate about AI policy, but it is essential to understand when nonprofit advocacy is simply a front for a competitive commercial interest. What do you make of the official OpenAI response to what you claim?
So one thing is, I think Jason focuses on the fact that we became involved with the lawsuit between Elon and OpenAI by filing an amicus brief arguing that it was in the public interest for OpenAI to remain a nonprofit. Jeffrey Hinton also, made some positive comments about our amicus and showed support for our arguments. He's also someone who, by the way, has called for Elon Musk to lose his status with the Royal Academies, and is really not a fan of Musk. If you want another example of not everyone who is critical of OpenAI's restructuring is a Musk fan. Yeah, also on the point of the did not oppose SB 53, it is true that they never put out something saying that they formally opposed it, but their global affairs head, Chris Lehane, did send a letter to Governor Newsom at a time when SB 53 was in, pretty heated discussion, saying that he believes the correct path for California is to have an exemption from its AI frameworks for any company that signs on to an agreement with the federal government for testing, or that says that they will be adhering to the EU AI Code of Practice, which in practice means a complete exemption from the California law. So, you can say that advocating for you to be completely exempted and all of your bunch of your fellow companies to be completely exempted is not the same as opposing it. You can ask a linguist for whether that's fair, but I think it still is important context that he did not discuss.
What now? Are you going to send OpenAI the information that they're asking for? Are you planning to do any more transparency around your funding or your advocacy efforts? What's the next shoe here?
So we sent them our objections and responses where we laid out in 4 areas that were relevant, like, for instance, our communications or funding received by Elon, saying that those didn't exist, and saying that for the other pieces of information that they were not relevant. They never responded to that. They could have filed a motion to compel, saying to the judge that we have to turn them over, but they didn't do that. My view, again, don't know this for sure, is that they didn't know that because they realized a judge would not grant that motion because they were not in fact relevant. And yeah, I think there are fair discussions about transparency. I think there's fair things if, some of our donors want to be private, and when you're donating to C4s, you have the right to give money privately. We have listed on our site a lot of our donors, and I think I think you get a clear impression of the different types of motivations that people have who are funding us. But I think this kind of larger discussion about what the appropriate transparency is for folks involved in the advocacy process is very different from I don't think that's what OpenAI cares about here, or why they're asking about this. And even in the subpoena, which was an overreach in many ways, they don't talk about, the Omidio Foundation, which again is listed on our website as a funder. We're not hiding that fact because it's not relevant to their litigation with Musk. So,
but you said there are donors that you don't list on your website who want to remain private. Would you like to tell us who they are or how much they're giving you?
Not here. No.
Okay. Just checking. I have to ask.
Fair.
I think the
they're
larger
not
question
Musk.
here,
They're not Musk or Zuckerberg. They're not Musk or Zuckerberg. We don't take money from frontier AI companies. Yeah, I don't know. I will say that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's a reasonable thing to advocate for, that all of these groups should be required to disclose much more about who funds them. But I think that should apply equally to organizations that are pushing for the other side of things here. I think I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think that's a fair discussion to have. I'm just not sure OpenAI is the one to make that argument.
So as you look back on this episode, how has it changed the way that you think about OpenAI? I
genuinely have a lot of positive feelings about OpenAI and think that they do many things genuinely better than their peers. For instance, Meta or XAI. And I think that, for instance, some of their safety research and system cards are things that they've even improved on in recent months and have done a genuinely good job of. And I think that there is some of a feeling among some people at OpenAI that they get disproportionate criticism relative to their peers. And I think that there is, some truth in that. One thing I will say is, like, I don't know, if one of their peers had been the one to show up at my house and give me a subpoena, I would have said about that too. But it was OpenAI that was the one that did it. And also, I think there's some aspect that OpenAI is a nonprofit, and they are a nonprofit that has a mission to ensure that AGI benefits all of humanity. And, they are in the process of trying to weaken and get around that legal mission and be able to consider profit more in their decisions. And I think this episode, and also things like, the discussion about whether to allow, not safe for work, porn or whatever on ChatGPT, or to, release Sora 2 in the way they released it, and their kid safety practice and all sorts of these other things, that, like, they are not a normal for-profit company. They are, at least for now, a nonprofit that is dedicated to this mission above profit. And I do think that means that they should be held to a higher standard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, it's not like Elon Musk is the only person who opposes this restructuring plan. Like, the whole AI safety, community has been up in arms about this for years now.
It's very unpopular, this
Yes.
plan. Yeah.
Yeah. I am just curious what you make of kind of the difference between, Joshua's statement and Jason's statement, and kind of some of this, like, continued evolution and pressure you have between OpenAI kind of transitioning from more of a research organization focused on some of these loftier ideals to trying to move to the next stage of what it wants to do.
I mean, I think it just speaks to a very real tension within the company, which is that there are a lot of people there who believe in the stated mission, who want to create this very beneficial AI. And then you also have a lot of people who come from other giant tech companies who see this primarily as a competition about winning and being first and making the most money. And people who come from those kind of companies are not above, waging lawfare to get what they want. So I'll be curious to see kind of how that shakes out in the coming months. It does seem like it's that second group, the kind of big company group that is currently steering the company. And I wonder if that's going to continue.
But I will say, in addition to that, I think that's right. Your story, Nathan, has caused more consternation and soul searching among people at OpenAI than I think anything since the Daniel Cocatello story about these non-disparagement agreements that they were forcing people to sign, or else they would claw back their vested equity in the company. That was a big deal to people at OpenAI, and this is a big deal to people at OpenAI. I've been talking to people. It's not just Josh who is saying this stuff. I think there's a lot of soul searching going on inside the company about this question of, are we still the good guys? Are we transitioning to something we no longer support? And so I think there's going to be some internal qualms about this and probably other stories to come. But most of them probably won't break out into the open the way this has. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on and explaining all this to us.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Just wanted to note that we reached out to OpenAI after this interview asking about this question of intimidation, and they responded with a statement from Jason Kwan reiterating that, quote, Elon has opposed our restructure for obvious competitive reasons, and Encode joined in. Organizations that suddenly emerge or shift priorities to join Elon raise legitimate questions about coordination and funding, which the subpoena seeks to clarify. Our questions have still not been answered, and we still don't transparently know who is funding these organizations.
Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.